What we've seen over the last couple of days indicates the degree to which Iraq's going to need more help. It's going to need more help from us, and it's going to need more help from the international community. In our consultations with the Iraqis, there will be some short-term, immediate things that need to be done militarily, and our national security team is looking at all the options. But this should be also a wake-up call for the Iraqi government.
Now, here's why this is a wake-up call for that Maliki government that refused to come to a status forces agreement with the U.S. and has largely excluded Sunnis from the political process. Beyond the fleeing of nearly 500,000 residents out of the city of Mosul, reports of mass beheadings now and the takeover of multiple cities in Iraq by al-Qaeda-inspired groups. Today, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, an insurgent group that's seizing land to create a new Islamic State, just became $425 million richer. That's because it robbed the central bank of Mosul, plus several other smaller banks across the city. The IS is now suddenly the richest terrorist organization in the world, according to the Washington Post. And here you can see this progression. These insurgents, as they make their way from across the Syrian border, moving east and south. They're roughly 70 miles from Baghdad now, and all this has Senator John McCain angry.
If I sound angry, it's because I am angry. To declare that a conflict is over does not mean that it necessarily is over. It's time that the president got a new national security team. It's time that he got a group of people together that know what it is to succeed in conflict.
Joining me now from Iraq is NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. Richard, what can you tell us about this increasing insurgency and these cross-border problems?
Well, I think Iraq is in a state of collapse. And to talk about Iraq needing more help, the government needing to get its act together and to get back on the right track, I think we may be beyond that stage. I think we've turned that corner. The country is breaking into three pieces. So when the president talks about helping Iraq and changing Maliki's policies, Maliki's forces are crumbling. They are surrendering. He doesn't control Kurdistan, where I am, in northern Iraq. He doesn't control western and central Iraq. Militias are arming. This is becoming a transnational problem. So when you talk about helping Iraq, I'm not sure which part of Iraq the U.S. is supposed to be helping right now. It's a bit like grabbing a piece of water. It will continue to slip through your fingers because it is falling apart.
And in your reporting, Richard, you've been talking about the fact that in many areas the weapons are not under control, U.S. Humvees being seized, the spillover from Syria. What do airstrikes in this context, if ordered by the U.S., what would they achieve?
I have no idea. I don't know who they'd be striking. I don't know exactly where they would be striking. U.S. has been out of the loop here for a while, doesn't have intelligence packets on all of these different ISIS fighters, would have to get back acquainted with the situation. Once you leave, it's not like you re-plug back in and immediately are where you left off. Also, you will then become involved in the Syria fight.
Right.
If you come in here, back the Shiite government of Maliki, and you fight against the Sunni rebels who are aligned with the Sunni rebels in Syria, well, then you are part of the Syria conflict, which I think the United States decided it didn't want to do. I don't know. If you decide to come back in here, you better have a vision for all of these conflicts. For Lebanon, because that's been excluded in all of this. Lebanon is part of this as well, and Syria and Iraq. So if let's say the United States decides to back Maliki, starts bombing somebody, where, I don't know, how, I don't know, but they start bombing at Maliki's behest. Okay? Then you're fighting against Sunnis. Then, on the other side, through Turkey, you are giving money and arms to the Sunnis. If that confuses me, and I've been covering this region for almost 20 years, I think it would confuse a lot of people in the region who would say, who would really have no idea what the U.S. strategy would be right now. vis-a-vis Iraq and Syria and Lebanon. We're going to be hearing more about Lebanon in the coming days as Hezbollah and Iran and Shiite militias get more and more involved in this.
Sobering and very well put. Thank you for your reporting from Erbil, Iraq, Richard Engel, and stay safe. Joining me now is Nicholas Kristof, columnist for The New York Times, and Steve Clemens, an MSNBC contributor and editor-at-large for The Atlantic. Good evening, gentlemen. You hear the reports there. Steve, let me start with you. Richard hits it on the head. We had something of a debate in this nation about not going into Syria. As ugly as it was, going in would be uglier. Going in and trying to do airstrikes to support, as he was saying, Maliki here, could really complicate the spillover from Syria. Steve?
Well, I think that's right. I think Richard Engel did a beautiful job of describing an utter mess. And it could become even messier because I do think, I just spoke to senior White House officials and State Department officials just moments ago, wanted to emphasize to me that all options are on the table other than boots on the ground, and with a strong intonation that airstrikes, drone strikes are being contemplated. But there's another dimension here could make what Richard described even worse. Barzani in Kurdistan has long said that Maliki's failure to hold the government together and to deliver on democracy would likely mean that Kurdistan would seek an alternative path. And if Kurdistan really does break away, that has implications for Syria and Turkey as well. In addition, we haven't talked at all about what Iran's interests are. Iran has grown very close to Maliki, and of course, when it sees the kind of onslaught against Shia shrines and temples, which we've seen destroyed in the last days, and the Sunnis really beginning to move there, that's another dimension of Iran potentially entering the Iraq fray as well, as they have already in Syria. So this could get very, very messy, and I think that Richard's right. It's not clear that the United States has a strategic map in place as to how to define where it will go.
Right. And Nick, when you look at this, as Richard is reporting, we in the U.S., including policymakers, may still be talking about a type of nation state that is crumbling before our eyes in Iraq, a warning we've heard from people about, a reason not to go in. It's also a warning people said who wanted to stay in longer. I want to play Senator McCain today saying that the solution here is to put in more of the Bush team. Take a listen.
What do we need to do now? Obviously, the first thing I think we need to do is call together the people that succeeded in Iraq, those that have been retired, and get together that group and place them in responsibility positions so that they can develop a policy to reverse this tide of radical Islamic extremism, which directly threatens the security of the United States of America. And it's time that the president got a new national security team. It's time that he got a group of people together that know what it is to succeed in conflict. And I would say the leader of that would be General Petraeus. I would say that General Mattis is one. I would say that General Keane is another one. I would say that Bob Kagan is another one.
Well, I mean, this isn't a political football. This is a country. And the problem here isn't Democrats and it's not Republicans. It is political. It's Prime Minister al-Maliki. And al-Maliki has been a catastrophe. I do think that air power might end up being a part of the solution, but only in the context of al-Maliki sharing power with Sunni militias and devolution of power from the center to the regions.
Can I ask you something?
Otherwise,
Can
we
I ask
can't
you
do
something?
anything.
What do you say to people who feel that we've put so much into this country, or as Richard Engel is arguing, this ex-country, and that getting back into an air campaign without a clear strategic objective is really restarting a part of a war we're trying to end?
Well, it has to be done in the context of a strategic objective and in the context of changes in Iraq. But if that happens, then I think it's worth considering. And you have to, realize the alternative. What we're headed toward is a catastrophe. In Syria, 160,000 people have died there. And if it expands to Iraq, then that's going to be bad for terrorism. It's going to be a humanitarian disaster. And it's not clear that air power will make it any better. But we're headed toward the abyss.
Steve, your thoughts on that, and also speak to the basic reaction I think many Americans may have, which is, I haven't heard about this in a while, and now I'm hearing reports that this whole thing is dissolving, and I feel like I'm reliving a question from 2003 over how much to bomb Iraq.
Well, Two things. One, I think Nick Kristof frames it well in the sense that perhaps with air power you might be able to pull something together where you were able to decentralize power. Joe Biden, before he became vice president, and Les Gelb, the former counsel on foreign relations, put together a plan that was widely pilloried called the Biden-Gelb plan that would take these various parts of the country, 3 semi-autonomous regions, loosely federate them. And that might be the best case today. And so we may be going back to sort of Joe Biden's prescient observations way back that the interests of these 3 couldn't be balanced very well unless you created something like that sort of structure. That might work, and I think that could create a strategic frame. But I think bottom line is we invaded Iraq. For John McCain to say put the Bush guys back in place and have them redo this, we invaded Iraq when there were no weapons of mass destruction, and we opened a Pandora's box. People like myself on this station were saying this could end up becoming a nightmare. We created sectarian lines in that country and awoke them in a way that they had never been awoken for many, many years. And this is now a dividing line throughout the Middle East and North Africa region. So the Bush administration created this drama. And the idea that John McCain would say, let's go back with the same sorts of intervention that we had before as a way to save this problem is crazy. Now we need to find a new equilibrium of parts of power centers that have felt disenfranchised.
Right. No, and
Maliki has alienated the Sunnis, and the Sunnis need to come back.
Right. And Steve, your point about the Biden-Gelb plan was seen at the time as pessimistic. It may just be realistic if we're in 3 pieces. I want to also mention from Richard Engel's reporting on the ground, he said today, the ethnic sectarian lines here look like 3 pieces, although he called them Shiistan, Kurdistan, and Jihadistan, which is even more ominous. Nicholas Kristof and Steve Clemens, we're out of time, but we will hopefully revisit this with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Coming up, Rick Perry may have just uttered his first oops moment of the 2016 race by making a comparison between, yes, homosexuality and alcoholism. And where did he make that speech? It makes it even more oops. Stay with us.